Sometimes a father's love sounds like piano keys at 3 in the morning. Sometimes hope lives in the hands of a man who cleans toilets by day and plays his heart out when the world isn't watching. Andre Washington finished his night shift at the Grand Meridien Hotel. The marble lobby was empty and quiet. He walked to the grand piano like he did every night. His back hurt from cleaning floors for 8 hours, but the music helped him forget the pain. He played simple melodies, thinking about his 2 children sleeping at home. The rent was due next week. His wife's hospital bills still came in the mail every month, even though she was gone. Charlotte York sat in a chair across the lobby. She was a famous music critic who discovered talented musicians. She had heard thousands of perfect performances, but Andre's playing was different. It was real. But would Andre's choice between family and fortune tear apart everything he was trying to protect? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock screamed at 6:30 a.m., same as every morning for the past 3 years. Andre Washington rolled out of bed, his body protesting the 4 hours of sleep between his hotel shift and dawn. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen barely wide enough for 2 people to pass, but it was home. More importantly, it was theirs, at least for now. He shuffled to the kitchen and started the coffee maker, a wedding gift from Sarah's mother that somehow kept working despite its age. Everything in their lives seemed to operate on borrowed time. These days, the refrigerator hummed with a concerning wheeze. The bathroom faucet dripped despite 3 attempts to fix it. Even Andre's work boots had holes worn through the soles, sealed with duct tape to last another month. Through the thin walls, he could hear Mrs. Chen next door getting ready for her own early shift at the textile factory. The sounds of working. People filled this building, alarm clocks, shower water running, muffled conversations about bills and overtime. Andre had grown to appreciate this symphony of survival. It reminded him he wasn't alone in the struggle. "Daddy." Miranda's voice called from the bedroom she shared with her younger brother Steve. At 12, she had developed an internal clock that woke her whenever Andre started moving around. She worried about him, though she tried to hide it behind the responsible face she wore like armor. "Morning, baby girl," Andre called back, pulling eggs from the refrigerator. 3 eggs left. Enough for the kids' breakfast, and he could grab something from the hotel's employee break room later. "Get your brother up. School day." Miranda appeared in the doorway, her hair braided the way Sarah used to do it. Andre had learned to braid from YouTube videos, practicing on a doll until his thick fingers could manage the delicate work. Some mornings, looking at Miranda felt like seeing Sarah's ghost, the same intelligent eyes and determined chin. "Steve doesn't want to get up," Miranda reported, already dressed in her school uniform. The uniform was second-hand, bought from a departing student's family, but Miranda wore it with pride. She understood the value of education in a way that broke Andre's heart. No 12-year-old should carry that kind of wisdom. Andre walked to the kid's bedroom and found Steve buried under covers, only the top of his head visible. At 8, Steve still believed the world was fundamentally good, that daddies could fix anything, that tomorrow would always come with breakfast and bedtime stories. Andre intended to protect that innocence as long as possible. "Come on, buddy," Andre said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Time to get ready for school." Steve emerged from the covers, hair sticking up in every direction. He had Sarah's smile, the kind that could light up a room even on the darkest days. "Can you make pancakes today, Daddy?" "Not today, son. But I'll make eggs, just the way you like them." The morning routine flowed with practiced efficiency. Andre scrambled eggs, while Miranda helped Steve get dressed. They ate breakfast together at the small table by the window, the one piece of furniture Sarah had insisted on buying. New when they first got married. "A family needs a proper table," she had said. "Somewhere to sit and talk about the day." Andre pulled out his wallet to give Miranda lunch money, a $10 bill that would have to cover both kids' meals. As he opened the worn leather, a photograph fell out, landing face up on the table. The family photo showed all four of them at the state fair 2 years ago, before Sarah got sick. They were laughing at something Steve had said. Cotton candy stuck to Miranda's chin, Andre's arm around Sarah's waist. The children grew quiet, looking at the picture. They didn't talk about Sarah much anymore, not because they'd forgotten, but because the grief still felt too big for their small apartment. "She would be proud of how hard you're working, Daddy," Miranda said quietly, carefully placing the photo back in Andre's wallet. "She would be proud of both of you," Andre replied, his voice thick with emotion he tried to swallow down. "Now finish your breakfast. Don't want to be late." The walk to school took 15 minutes, past the check-cashing place with its neon signs, past the corner store where Mr. Kim always waved from behind bulletproof glass, past the bus stop where Andre would catch the number 47 to his day job at the warehouse. The Grand Meridien Hotel was a different world entirely, but that was still hours away. Andre worked at Morrison Logistics from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., loading trucks and managing inventory in a warehouse that stayed cold year-round. His supervisor, Dave, was a good man who understood Andre's situation and didn't ask questions when Andre needed to leave early for school conferences or doctor's appointments. The pay was steady, $6 an hour, but it wasn't enough to cover rent, utilities, groceries, and the medical debt that followed them like a shadow. Sarah's cancer treatment had lasted 18 months. Even with insurance, the co-pays and deductibles had climbed toward $30,000. The billing department at the hospital sent statements every month, polite but persistent reminders that grief didn't excuse debt. Andre had tried to negotiate payment plans, but the math was simple and unforgiving. They wanted money he didn't. After the warehouse shift, Andre picked up the kids from their after-school program at the community center. Miranda helped with homework, while Andre prepared dinner, usually something simple and filling. Pasta with butter and parmesan, rice and beans with whatever vegetables were on sale, grilled cheese and tomato soup when he could splurge on bread and cheese. The evening routine was sacred. Homework at the kitchen table, with Andre helping where he could. Bath time for Steve, who still needed supervision. Reading time, where Andre's deep voice brought storybook characters to life. Prayers by the bedside, thanking God for the day they'd had and asking for the strength to face tomorrow. By 9 p.m., the children were asleep, and Andre had 2 hours before his shift at the Grand Meridien began. He used this time for laundry, bill sorting, and the kind of worry that kept fathers awake at night. How long could he keep this schedule? What would happen when his body finally gave out? How could he give his children the future Sarah had dreamed of for them? The Grand Meridien Hotel sat in the heart of the financial district, 37 floors of marble and mahogany that catered to business travelers with expense accounts and tourists who measured vacation success in thread counts and room service menus. Andre had been working there for 8 months, hired after the warehouse reduced his hours. The hotel needed overnight custodial staff, and Andre needed the extra income. He entered through the service entrance at 11 p.m., changing into his uniform, in a basement locker room that smelled of industrial cleaning supplies. The night shift supervisor, Carlos, was a 30-year veteran who ran his crew with military precision but treated his workers with respect. "How are the kids, Andre?" Carlos asked as they reviewed the night's assignments. "Growing too fast," Andre replied, the standard answer that covered everything he couldn't explain. "Miranda's got a science project due next week, something about solar energy." "My daughter's in high school now," Carlos said, understanding the weight behind Andre's words. "Time goes by quicker than you think. Before you know it, they'll be graduating and heading off to college." College. Andre tried not to think about college savings accounts or SAT prep courses or application fees. Those were luxuries for families with different problems. The night shift moved through the hotel floors systematically, vacuumed the carpeted hallways, cleaned the elevators, and polished the brass. empty trash cans and replace liner bags, scrub bathroom, floors and refill soap dispensers. The work was methodical and solitary, which suited Andre fine. It gave him time to think, to process the weight of being the only parent his children had left. Around 2:30 a.m., when the hotel reached its deepest quiet, Andre would make his way to the main lobby. The grand piano sat near the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto the city street. It was a Steinway baby grand, worth more than Andre would make in 5 years, positioned to catch the morning light when breakfast guests gathered for coffee and business meetings. Andre's mother had taught him to play when he was 7 years old, before the diabetes took her when he was 15. She'd worked 2 jobs to pay for his lessons, believing music would give him opportunities she couldn't. "Music is a language everyone understands," she used to say. "It can open doors that stay closed to everything else." After she died, Andre had stopped playing. Life became about survival. Finish high school, find work, build something stable. When he met Sarah at 22, she convinced him to play for her on an old upright piano in her apartment. "Your mother was right," Sarah had said after hearing him play. "Music is who you are. Don't lose that part of yourself." But somewhere between marriage and parenthood and medical bills, the music had faded into background noise. Until Sarah got sick and Andre needed something to keep his hands busy during those long nights in hospital waiting rooms. He'd started playing again in the chapel piano, soft hymns that helped him pray for miracles that never came. Now, in the hotel lobby at 3 a.m., Andre played for different reasons. Not for hope or healing, but for the simple human need to create something beautiful in a world that felt increasingly harsh. His playing wasn't perfect. He'd forgotten some techniques, never learned others, but it was honest. Each note carried the weight of his exhaustion, his love for his children, his grief for the woman who'd believed in him. The music echoed off the marble walls, mixing with the distant hum of the hotel's climate system and the occasional sound of a car passing on the street outside. Andre played with his eyes closed, letting muscle memory guide his fingers through melodies that felt like conversations with Sarah, like lullabies for children who were sleeping miles away, like prayers for strength to face another day. He didn't know that Charlotte York had been sitting in the shadow of a marble column for the past 3 nights, listening. He didn't know that her layover flights had become excuses to hear the night janitor play piano in an empty lobby. He didn't know that tomorrow night, everything would change. The knock came at 7:43 a.m., just as Andre was packing the kids' lunch. Bags, 3 sharp raps that carried the authority of bad news. Miranda looked up from her cereal, her face already showing the wariness that came from too much experience with unexpected visitors. "Stay here and eat," Andre told the children, walking to the front door with the kind of dread that settled in his stomach like cold stones. Through the peephole, he saw Mr. Kowalski, their landlord, holding a manila envelope and wearing the expression of a man who delivered this kind of news too many times. Andre opened the door slowly, as if delaying the moment might change what was coming. "Andre," Mr. Kowalski said, his voice carrying genuine regret, "I'm sorry to do this, but I have to serve you with this notice." The eviction notice was printed on legal letterhead, formal language that translated into simple terms: 30 days to pay $3,247.82 in back rent and late fees, or find somewhere else to live. Andre stared at the numbers, his vision blurring slightly around the edges. He'd been late on rent twice in the past 4 months, juggling utility payments and grocery money, but he'd thought he was managing to stay afloat. "The management company is pushing me," Mr. Kowalski continued, his Polish accent thicker when he was uncomfortable. "They say no more extensions. I tried to explain your situation about your wife, but they don't care about personal circumstances." Andre nodded, not trusting his voice. $3,000 might as well have been $3 million. Even if he worked every available overtime hour at both jobs, he couldn't come up with that much money in 30 days. "Daddy," Steve's voice called from the kitchen, "is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, buddy," Andre called back, his voice steadier than he felt. "Finish your breakfast." Mr. Kowalski shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Andre, you're good people. You keep the place clean, no noise complaints, kids are respectful. If I owned the building myself, we'd work something out. But these corporate guys, they only see numbers." After Mr. Kowalski left, Andre sat at the kitchen table with the eviction notice spread in front of him. Miranda finished her cereal and looked at the official document with eyes too mature for her age. "Is that about our apartment?" she asked quietly. Andre considered lying, protecting her from the adult reality of their situation. But Miranda had been his partner in survival for 3 years. She deserved honesty. "We're behind on rent," he said. "But I'm going to figure something out. I always do, right?" Miranda nodded, but her hands were shaking slightly as she cleared her bowl. Steve, oblivious to the tension, asked if he could take cookies to school for his friend's birthday. The walk to school felt longer than usual. Andre's mind raced through impossible calculations, trying to find money that didn't exist. He could ask for advances on his paychecks, but both employers had policies against it. He could try to sell something, but they owned nothing of significant value except Sarah's wedding ring, which he'd sworn never to part with. At Morrison Logistics, Andre's supervisor, Dave, noticed his distraction immediately. "Everything all right, man?" Dave asked during their morning break. "You look like you got hit by a truck." Andre considered sharing the news, but what could Dave do? The warehouse wasn't in a position to give raises or bonuses. Most of the guys there were fighting their own financial battles. "Just tired," Andre said. "Long night at the hotel. You sure you're not working too much? Body can only take so much." Andre almost laughed. Working too much wasn't the problem. Not working enough was. But Dave meant well, and Andre appreciated the concern. During lunch break, Andre walked to First National Bank, the same institution that had approved their mortgage 6 years ago when life seemed full of possibilities. The loan officer, a young woman with a sympathetic smile and immaculate suit, reviewed Andre's application with professional politeness. "Mr. Washington, I understand your situation, and I wish I could help. But with your current debt-to-income ratio and the medical bills on your credit report, I can't approve a personal loan for this amount." "What if I put up collateral?" Andre asked, though he wasn't sure what he could offer. "Do you own any property?" "A vehicle with significant value." Andre's 2003 Honda Civic had 247,000 miles and a transmission that slipped in cold weather. The bank wasn't interested in his assets because he didn't have any. "I'm sorry," the loan officer said, sliding the rejection papers across her desk. "If your circumstances change, maybe if you get a significant raise or find a co-signer, we could revisit the application." Andre walked back to work through downtown streets lined with restaurants where business lunches cost more than his family. Spent on groceries in a week. The contrast felt especially sharp today. The distance between his world and theirs, measured in dollars, he couldn't earn fast enough. The afternoon shift at the warehouse passed in a blur of physical labor that couldn't quiet his racing thoughts. How would he tell the children? Where would they go? The homeless shelter had a waiting list, and the family motels on the outskirts of town charged more per week than his current rent. After picking up the kids from the community center, Andre tried to maintain normalcy during dinner and homework time, but Steve noticed his distraction. "Daddy, you're not listening to my math problem," Steve said, tugging on Andre's sleeve. "Sorry, buddy, say it again." Miranda watched from across the table, her expression thoughtful. After Steve went to brush his teeth, she approached Andre with the directness that reminded him so much of Sarah. "How much money do we need?" she asked. "Miranda, you don't need to worry about—" "How much?" Andre looked at his daughter, this 12-year-old who helped with laundry and made sure Steve did his homework and never complained about their second-hand clothes or generic cereal. She deserved the truth. $3,000, he said. Miranda was quiet for a long moment. "That's a lot." "Yeah, it is. But you'll figure it out," she said. And Andre heard the question underneath the statement. "I'll figure it out," he promised, hoping it wasn't a lie. That night at the Grand Meridien, Andre's cleaning routine felt mechanical, his body going through familiar motions while his mind wrestled with impossible problems. Carlos noticed his distraction but didn't comment. Night shift workers learned to respect each other's privacy. At 3 a.m., Andre made his way to the lobby piano, needing the music more than ever. His fingers found the keys with muscle memory, but tonight the melodies felt different. Heavier, the notes carried the weight of desperation, the sound of a man running out of options. He played an old spiritual his mother had taught him, Wade. In the water, letting the familiar rhythm steady his breathing. The song was about crossing over, about finding freedom on the other side of struggle. Tonight, Andre couldn't see the other side. That's beautiful. Andre's hands froze on the keys. A woman's voice, cultured and confident, came from behind him. He turned to see someone sitting in one of the lobby's leather chairs, partly hidden in shadow. "I'm sorry," Andre said, standing quickly. "I didn't know anyone was here. I can stop." "Please, don't stop," the woman said, moving into the light. She was perhaps 50, elegantly dressed despite the late hour, with the kind of sophisticated bearing that suggested she belonged in places like the Grand Meridien. "I've been listening for several nights now. You have a remarkable gift." Andre felt heat rise in his cheeks. I finish my work and sometimes I play a little. I didn't think anyone could hear." "I'm Charlotte York," she said, extending her hand. "I'm a music critic. I write for several publications and I scout talent for recording labels." Andre shook her hand, bewildered. "Andre Washington, I'm just the janitor here." "You're much more than that," Charlotte said, her eyes serious. "The way you play, there's something authentic about it. Raw. I've heard technically perfect performances that left me cold, but your music tells a story." Andre didn't know how to respond. The eviction notice was still folded in his back pocket, and this conversation felt surreal, like something that happened to other people. "Would you mind playing something else?" Charlotte asked. "I'd like to." "Hear more." Andre sat back down at the piano, his hands trembling slightly. This time he played Amazing Grace, the song they'd sung at Sarah's funeral. The melody flowed from his fingers like a prayer, filled with grief and love, and the kind of hope that survived even in the darkest moments. When he finished, Charlotte was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Washington," she said finally, I should talk." Charlotte York reached into her purse and withdrew a business card, its embossed lettering catching the lobby's ambient lighting. The card felt substantial in Andre's rough hands, like a small piece of a world he'd never imagined entering. "Charlotte York Music Management," he read aloud. "Talent development and artist relations. I've been in this business for 23 years, Charlotte said, settling back into her chair with the confidence of someone accustomed to being listened to. "I started as a reviewer for the Washington Post, then moved into talent scouting. I've helped launch careers that you'd recognize. Artists who've won Grammys, performed at Carnegie Hall, sold millions of records." Andre turned the card over, in his fingers, noting the phone numbers and email addresses that represented possibilities he couldn't quite grasp. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because in all those years, I've rarely heard anything as compelling as what you just played. Technical perfection is common in this business, Mr. Washington. Conservatory training produces hundreds of technically proficient musicians every year. But what you have, that emotional honesty, that ability to make people feel something real, that's extraordinary." The conversation felt like it was happening to someone else. Andre glanced around the marble lobby, reminding himself that an hour ago he'd been emptying trash cans and mopping floors. The eviction notice in his back pocket seemed to crinkle with every movement, a paper reminder of his actual circumstances. "I appreciate the kind words," Andre said carefully, "but I'm not looking to be a musician. I have responsibilities. 2 children who need—" "What do they need most?" Charlotte interrupted gently. "A father who's working himself to exhaustion at 2 jobs, or a father who's found a way to provide for them while doing something meaningful." Andre stood up from the piano bench. the question hitting too close to home. You don't understand my situation. Then help me understand. Talk to me. Something in Charlotte's voice, patient, genuinely interested, broke through Andre's defenses. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the impossible weight of the eviction notice, or simply the relief of having someone acknowledge his music as something more than a janitor's hobby. My wife died 3 years ago, Andre said, the words coming slowly. Cancer. The medical bills, even with insurance, we owe more than I'll make in 2 years. I work the warehouse during the day, here at night. My kids are 12 and 8, and they need me to keep the lights on and food on the table. I don't have time for dreams. Charlotte listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. When Andre finished, she was quiet for a moment before speaking. What if it wasn't about dreams? What if it was about practical solutions to practical problems? I'm not following. Small performance opportunities, coffee shops, hotel lounges, private events, nothing that would interfere with your current schedule, but things that could bring in extra income. Real money, Mr. Washington. Not enough to quit your day jobs immediately, but enough to start breathing a little easier. Andre felt a flutter of something, not quite hope but curiosity. How much extra income? For someone with your authentic style, a coffee shop gig might pay $200 for a 3-hour evening. Hotel lounges pay more. Private parties. For wealthy clients, that's where the real money is. I know people who book that kind of entertainment, $200. That would cover a week's groceries with money left over. 3 or 4 such gigs could make a serious dent in the rent situation. But I don't have experience performing for people, Andre said. What I do here, it's just for me. What you do here is remarkable. It would translate beautifully to intimate venues, and I could help you prepare, give you guidance on song selection, performance techniques. Andre found himself considering the possibility, even as part of his mind insisted it was foolish to hope. Why would you want to help me? What's in it for you? Charlotte smiled, the first time he'd seen her expression soften. Honestly, because I love music, and I haven't heard anything this moving in years, but also because I believe there's a market for authentic performers. People are tired of manufactured perfection. They want to hear something real. She reached into her purse again and pulled out a small recording device. Would you mind if I recorded you playing something? Just so I can share it with a few contacts, see if there's interest? Andre looked at the device, smaller than his palm, but somehow intimidating. Being recorded felt permanent, official, like crossing a line he couldn't uncross. I don't know, he said. I need to think about this. Of course. Take the card. Think it over. But Mr. Washington, Charlotte stood up, gathering her coat and purse. Don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't come often, and they don't wait forever. After Charlotte left, Andre sat alone in the lobby with her business card in his hand. The hotel's night sounds, elevator motors, distant air conditioning, the occasional a footstep in an upper hallway seemed louder in the silence. He played a few more songs, but his heart wasn't in it. Charlotte's words echoed in his mind, mixing with the practical reality of his situation. $3,000 in 30 days. $200 per coffee shop performance. The math was both encouraging and impossible. Encouraging because the money could help, impossible because he couldn't see how to make it work with his current schedule. The drive home took Andre through the pre-dawn city, past 24-hour diners where night shift workers grabbed breakfast, past bus stops where early commuters waited in the cold. His world, he realized, was full of people like him, working multiple jobs, juggling responsibilities, trying to keep their families afloat. At home, he checked on the children, both sleeping peacefully in their shared bedroom. Miranda had left. A glass of water on his nightstand, the way Sarah used to do when she knew he'd be coming home late. The simple gesture nearly undid him. In his own bedroom, Andre sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out Charlotte's business card again. The professional typography, the quality paper stock, everything about it spoke of a world where people made livings from music, where talent translated into financial stability. He thought about Miranda's question. How much money do we need? $3,000 to save their home, but more than that, really. Enough to stop the constant anxiety about bills, enough to give his children the security every child deserved. Andre placed the card on his nightstand and lay down, though sleep felt impossible. His mind raced between skepticism and hope, between the practical reality of his responsibilities and the unexpected possibility Charlotte had presented. Tomorrow, he would have to face another day at the warehouse, another evening with his children, another night at the hotel. But now there was also Charlotte's offer to consider, her suggestion that his late-night piano playing might be worth something to other people. The eviction notice was still in his work pants pocket, folded and waiting. But for the first time in months, Andre fell asleep wondering if there might be another way forward, a path he hadn't seen before tonight. He didn't dream about music or performance stages. He dreamed about Miranda and Steve sleeping in their own beds, safe and secure, while their father played piano in a warm, well-lit room where the sound of hope echoed off walls that belonged to them. Andre woke to the sound of Miranda making breakfast, the gentle clink of spoons against bowls filtering through his thin bedroom door. 4 hours of sleep felt like luxury compared to some nights, but his body protested as he rolled out of bed. Charlotte's business card caught his eye from the nightstand, and the previous night's conversation rushed back with startling clarity. In the kitchen, Miranda had set out cereal and milk for Steve, who was trying to eat while simultaneously building something elaborate with his napkin. The domestic scene felt both precious and fragile, a reminder of everything Andre was fighting to preserve. "Morning, Daddy," Steve said without looking up from his napkin construction. "I'm making a castle. Want to see?" "That's amazing, buddy." Andre ruffled his son's hair and poured coffee into a mug that read, "World's Best Dad." A Father's Day gift from 2 years ago that Miranda had bought with her own saved allowance money. "You got home later than usual," Miranda observed. Not quite a question, but close enough. Andre hesitated. The conversation with Charlotte felt too uncertain, too much like false hope to share with his children. Had some extra work to finish up. During the walk to school, Steve chattered about his upcoming science project while Miranda walked quietly beside them. Andre found himself really listening to Steve's enthusiasm about solar panels and renewable energy, remembering what it felt like to be excited about learning, about possibilities. "Mr. Kim says I can interview him about his store for the project," Steve continued. "He has solar panels on his roof that help power the refrigerators." "That sounds like a great idea," Andre said, making a mental note to thank Mr. Kim for his kindness. The Korean War veteran had become something of a neighborhood grandfather figure, always patient with children's questions and quick to offer help when families were struggling. At Morrison Logistics, Dave noticed Andre's distraction almost immediately. "You sure everything's okay?" Dave asked during their morning safety briefing. "You seem like your mind's somewhere else." "Just thinking about some things," Andre replied, which was true enough. "Well, keep your head in the game." Martinez called. "In sick, so we're short-handed on the loading dock." The extra work meant more hours, which meant more pay, but it also meant Andre would be running late to pick up the children. He called the community center to arrange for them to stay in extended care, another $12 he hadn't budgeted for, but couldn't avoid. During lunch break, Andre found himself pulling out Charlotte's business card. The embossed lettering felt real under his fingers, proof that last night's conversation had actually happened. Almost without thinking, he dialed the number. "Charlotte York Music Management." A professional voice answered. "This is Andre Washington. I met Ms. York last night at the Grand Meridien Hotel." "Oh yes, Mr. Washington. Ms. York mentioned you might call. She's in meetings this afternoon, but she asked me to schedule a time for you to speak with her. Are you available tomorrow evening?" Andre thought about his schedule. Warehouse until 4, kids until 11, hotel until dawn. "I work nights. Could we meet around 6 p.m.? Perfect. Would you prefer to meet at her office, or would you be more comfortable somewhere less formal? The question revealed Charlotte's understanding of his situation. Somewhere less formal would be good. There's a quiet coffee shop called Arabica on 5th Street. Do you know it? Andre knew the area, not far from the children's school, in a neighborhood where coffee cost more than he usually spent on an entire lunch. I'll find it. After work, Andre picked up Miranda and Steve from the extended care program. The community center supervisor, Mrs. Rodriguez, pulled him aside with the gentle concern that came from years of working with struggling families. Andre, I know this is hard, but Steve mentioned something about moving. Are you okay? Do you need resources? The kindness in her voice nearly broke Andre's composure. We're managing. Just some temporary housing issues. There are programs that can help with emergency rent assistance, and the children qualify for the free meal program if you need to apply. Andre nodded, filing the information away even as his pride resisted the idea of charity. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. At home, while the children did homework, Andre found himself thinking about Charlotte's questions from the night before. What did his children need most? Stability, certainly, but also a father who wasn't constantly stressed about money, who could be present during their conversations instead of mentally calculating bills. Daddy, can you help me with this math problem? Steve called from the kitchen table. Andre sat beside his son, looking at the worksheet covered with word problems about money and percentages. The irony wasn't lost on him. Steve was learning to calculate discounts and savings, while Andre struggled with real-world financial problems that felt insurmountable. If a shirt costs $20 and it's 30% off, how much do you save? Steve read aloud. Well, 30% of 20 is $6, Andre explained, walking through the calculation. So you'd save $6. That's still a lot of money, Steve said matter-of-factly. Miranda looked up from her own homework. Everything's a lot of money when you don't have much. The observation, delivered with 12-year-old directness, hung in the air. Andre realized his children were more aware of their financial situation than he'd hoped. They heard the phone calls with bill collectors, noticed when dinners became simpler, understood why they couldn't afford school field trips or new clothes. That night at the Grand Meridien, Andre moved through his cleaning routine with Charlotte's offer, cycling through his thoughts. The idea of performing for strangers still felt intimidating, but the possibility of additional income felt increasingly necessary. When he reached the piano at 3 a.m., Andre noticed Charlotte had left something on the bench, a small digital recording device and a note written on hotel stationery. Mr. Washington, the note read. I took the liberty of speaking with a friend who books entertainment for upscale venues. He's interested in hearing what you do. If you're comfortable with it, please. Record yourself playing 2 or 3 songs. Nothing fancy, just what you normally play here. I'll pick up the device tomorrow night. See why? Andre held the recording device, weighing it in his palm. Such a small thing, but it represented a decision point. Recording himself would make. This reel would move Charlotte's offer from possibility into action. He sat at the piano and thought about Sarah, about the conversations they used to have about dreams and practicality. She'd always encouraged his music, even when life seemed to demand more immediate concerns. Play something for me, she used to say when she was sick, when the hospital rooms felt sterile and frightening. Play something that reminds me of home. Andre pressed the record button and began to play What a Wonderful World, the song Sarah had hummed during her chemotherapy treatments. His fingers found the melody easily, muscle memory guided by love and loss, and the simple human need to create something beautiful. As he played, Andre thought about Miranda's mature wisdom, about Steve's innocent trust that Daddy would fix everything, about the eviction notice that gave him 28 more days to find a solution. The music flowed from his fingers like a prayer, carrying all the weight of his love and fear and desperate hope. He recorded 3 songs that night: What a Wonderful World, Amazing Grace, and a simple melody he'd improvised months ago that reminded him of lullabies. Each song told a story of loss, of faith, of the quiet moments when parents watch their children sleep and promise to keep them safe. When Andre finished recording, the hotel lobby felt different somehow, more full of possibility, more like a place where dreams might actually take root, even in the heart of a man who cleaned floors for a living and worried about rent money. The recording device sat on the piano bench like a small beacon of hope. Tomorrow he would meet Charlotte at the coffee shop. Tomorrow he would learn whether his late-night piano playing might become something more than just a way to cope with grief and exhaustion. For tonight, though, Andre walked home through the pre-dawn city with his steps a little lighter, humming "What a Wonderful World" under his breath, and thinking that maybe, just maybe, his children's father might find a way to give them the wonderful world they deserved. Arabica Coffee occupied the ground floor of a converted brownstone, its exposed brick walls lined with local artwork and the kind of mismatched vintage furniture that suggested authenticity rather than corporate design. Andre arrived 10 minutes early, partly from nervous energy and partly because punctuality felt like the only professional quality he could confidently offer. Charlotte was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee and what appeared to be sheet music spread before her. She looked up as Andre approached, her expression warm but serious. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "I took the liberty of ordering you a coffee. I hope." "That's all right, thank you." Andre sat down carefully, hyper-aware of his warehouse clothes and work boots in this space where other patrons typed on laptops and discussed art exhibitions. "I brought your recording device." "Excellent. I listened to what you recorded last night." Charlotte's eyes were bright with enthusiasm. "Andre, what you captured there, it's extraordinary. The emotion, the authenticity. I've shared it with 3 different contacts, and they all had the same reaction." Andre felt his pulse quicken. "What kind of reaction?" "Interest. Real interest." Charlotte pulled out a legal pad covered with notes. "I spoke with Marcus Chen, who books talent for the Pemberton Hotel's Jazz Lounge. He wants to meet you. Sarah Williams runs entertainment for several upscale restaurants downtown, and James Morrison, he represents private clients who host intimate gatherings." The names meant nothing to Andre, but Charlotte's excitement was infectious. What would that mean exactly? Real paying gigs. The Pemberton Jazz Lounge pays $500 for a 3-hour evening set. Restaurant background music ranges from $200 to $400 for similar time commitments. Private events, depending on the client and occasion, can pay anywhere from $600 to $1,500. Andre tried to process the numbers. $500 for 3 hours was more than he made in a week at the warehouse. But doubt crept in immediately. "I don't have experience performing for people. What if I freeze up? What if they expect more than I can deliver?" "That's why we'll prepare," Charlotte said, spreading the sheet music across the table. "I've been thinking about song selection, about building sets that showcase your strengths. You have a natural gift for emotional interpretation, songs that tell stories, that make people feel something." Andre looked at the sheet music. Some he recognized, others were unfamiliar. "I can't read music very well. I play mostly by ear. That's actually an advantage in many ways. Your playing has an intuitive quality that formal training sometimes strips away. But we can work on expanding your repertoire, giving you confidence with a broader range of material." Charlotte pulled out her phone and showed Andre a video. "This is from last week at the Pemberton. Listen to the piano player they had. The performance was technically proficient, but somehow sterile. Each note precisely placed, but lacking the emotional weight that Andre brought to even simple melodies. The difference was striking. You see, perfect technique, but it doesn't move you. Your playing tells a story. That's what people are hungry for: authenticity, emotional connection." Andre found himself leaning forward, caught up in Charlotte's vision. "But I work nights. When would I perform?" Most jazz lounges want evening entertainment, 7 to 10 p.m., sometimes 8 to 11. Restaurant gigs are often earlier, 5 to 8 p.m. We'd need to coordinate with your schedule, obviously. I can't quit my day job, Andre said quickly. I need the steady income, the benefits. I'm not suggesting you quit anything yet. We start small, build your confidence and reputation. Eventually, if this develops the way I think it could, you might have options. Charlotte pulled out a calendar and began sketching out possibilities. Marcus wants to hear you audition next Friday evening. It's not a commitment, just a chance to show what you can do in a performance setting. Friday. Andre's mind raced through his schedule. He could potentially leave the warehouse early, meet the children after school, arrange for evening care. It would be complicated, but maybe possible. What would I need to do for this audition? 3 songs, maybe 4. A mix of standards and contemporary pieces that show your range. I'll help you prepare, give you some coaching on stage presence and audience interaction. Stage presence. Audience interaction. The terms felt foreign to Andre, who was used to playing alone in empty hotel lobbies. I don't know if I'm cut out for performing. You're already performing, Charlotte said gently. Every night in that hotel lobby, you're sharing your heart through music. The only difference is having people who are intentionally listening. Andre sipped his coffee, tasting something richer and more complex than the instant coffee he made at home. Everything about this conversation felt like stepping into a different world, one where his music might actually matter to people beyond himself. There's something else, Charlotte continued. I've been thinking about original compositions. The melody you recorded last night, the one that sounded like a lullaby. That's yours, isn't it? Andre nodded. I just sort of made it up one night. It reminds me of singing to my kids when they were babies. It's beautiful. And it's marketable. Original music opens up possibilities that cover songs don't. Recording contracts, publishing rights, real money. The conversation was moving faster than Andre could fully process. Recording contracts, publishing rights, these were concepts from a world he'd only seen in movies. I should probably tell you, Andre said. I've never written anything down. I just play what feels right. We can work on that too. Music notation software makes it easy to capture melodies these days. But honestly, some of the best composers I know started exactly the way you're describing, playing from the heart first, learning the technical aspects later. Charlotte gathered the sheet music and tucked it into a leather portfolio. I know, this is a lot to consider. Take the weekend to think about it. But Andre, she looked at him directly, her expression serious. Opportunities like this don't come often, and they rarely come to people who need them as much as you do. After Charlotte left, Andre sat in the coffee shop for another hour, nursing his cup and watching other patrons come and go. Young professionals met for business discussions. College students studied with headphones on. Elderly couples shared newspapers and pastries. Everyone seemed to belong here in a way that Andre wasn't sure he ever could. But Charlotte's enthusiasm was hard to dismiss. $500 for 3 hours of work, $600 to $1,500 for private events. The numbers represented possibilities he'd never imagined. Walking home, Andre passed the community center where his children were finishing their after-school program. Through the windows, he could see Steve building something with blocks while Miranda helped younger children with their homework. They looked content, safe in their routine. The eviction notice was still in his wallet, now 26 days from deadline. Charlotte's offer represented hope, but it also represented uncertainty. What if he embarrassed himself at the audition? What if he couldn't handle performing for strangers? What if this was all too good to be true? At home, while preparing dinner, Andre found himself humming the lullaby melody he'd recorded the night before. Miranda looked up from setting the table. That's pretty, Daddy. What song is that? Just something I made up, Andre said, stirring rice on the stove. You made that up? It sounds like something on the radio. The innocent observation hit Andre with unexpected force. Maybe his music was worth something after all. Maybe Charlotte's enthusiasm wasn't misplaced. Maybe Friday's audition was worth the risk. That night, as he tucked Steve into bed, his son asked the question that had been weighing on Andre's mind all day. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" Andre looked into his son's trusting eyes, thinking about eviction notices and auditions, about steady paychecks and impossible dreams. "We're going to be more than okay, buddy," Andre said, surprised to find he almost believed it. "We're going to be just fine." The stack of medical bills had grown thicker since Andre last counted them. Hospital statements, surgical fees, oncology, charges, pharmacy co-pays. A paper mountain of debt that represented Sarah's final 18 months. He spread them across the kitchen table after the children went to bed, organizing them by due date and amount, trying to find some pattern that might suggest a solution. $847.50 to Metro Oncology Associates, past due 60 days. $1,247.83 less to St. Mary's Hospital, threatening collection action. $234.92 to Advanced Radiology, marked final notice. The numbers blurred together, a mathematical expression of grief that never seemed to decrease no matter how much Andre paid. Toward the balances, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Collections Department, Metro Oncology. Please call to discuss payment arrangements for account 4478821. Failure to respond may result in legal action." Andre turned the phone face down on the table. He'd made payment arrangements 4 times with various medical providers, promising amounts he couldn't sustain. Watching late fees and interest charges accumulate faster than his payments could reduce the principal balances. Sarah's jewelry box sat on the dresser in his bedroom, untouched since her death, except for the few pieces he'd already sold to cover groceries and utilities. The engagement ring, a modest half-carat diamond he'd saved for 6 months to buy, still felt too sacred to consider. But her pearl necklace, the one her mother had given her for graduation, might bring enough to buy time with the rent. Thought made Andre's stomach clench with guilt and desperation. Sarah had loved that necklace, worn it to church every Sunday and on their anniversary dinners. But she'd also loved her children more than any possession, and Andre knew she'd understand. Miranda appeared in the doorway, wearing the oversized t-shirt she used as a nightgown, her hair braided for bed. "Can't sleep?" Andre asked, quickly gathering the bills into a neat stack. "I heard you moving around." Miranda sat at the table across from him, her expression serious. "The school counselor asked to talk to me today." Andre felt his chest tighten. "What about?" "She said my grades are slipping, and that I seem distracted." "In class?" Miranda picked at the edge of the table, not meeting his eyes. "She asked if everything was okay at home. What did you tell her? That we're fine, that you're working hard to take care of us." Miranda looked up at him then, her eyes too mature for her 12 years. "But Daddy, I know we're not fine. I know about the rent money. I know you're worried all the time." Andre reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. Her fingers were small and warm, her nails bitten down from stress she was too young to be carrying. "You don't need to worry about grown-up problems," he said. "But I do worry. And so does Steve, even though he doesn't understand why. Yesterday he asked me if we're going to be homeless." The word hit Andre like a physical blow. Homeless. He'd been so focused on finding solutions that he hadn't considered how his stress was affecting his children's sense of security. "What did you tell him?" "That you'd figure it out. You always do." Miranda's voice was steady, but Andre could hear the question underneath. "Right? You will figure it out?" "I'm working on some things," Andre said carefully. "Some new opportunities that might help." "The music thing?" Andre was startled. "How did you—" "He heard you playing that song you made up, and you've been different the last few days. Less worried, maybe. Like you're thinking about something hopeful instead of just something scary." Andre marveled at his daughter's perceptiveness. "There's a woman who thinks I might be able to play piano for money. Real money. She wants me to audition at a fancy hotel. That's good, right? Maybe. I don't know yet. It's complicated. Miranda was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the seriousness she brought to all adult matters. Would you have to quit your other jobs? Not right away. Maybe not at all. We'd see how it goes. I think you should try, Miranda said simply. You're really good at piano, Daddy. Remember when you used to play for Mama when she was sick? It was the only thing that made her smile near the end. The memory threatened to overwhelm Andre's. Composure. Sarah in the hospital bed, weak from chemotherapy, but managing to hum along when he played her favorite songs on the small keyboard they'd brought from home. She always said, "You were meant for something more than just working all the time," Miranda continued. Maybe this is what she meant. Friday arrived with unusual warmth for late autumn, as if the weather was conspiring to support Andre's tentative optimism. He'd arranged to leave the warehouse 2 hours early, using vacation time he'd been saving for emergencies. Dave had been understanding when Andre explained he had an important appointment. "Job interview?" Dave had asked. Something like that. Andre had replied. The Pemberton Hotel occupied an entire city block, its Art Deco facade speaking of an era when elegance was expected rather than exceptional. Andre stood on the sidewalk for several minutes, watching well-dressed people enter and exit through revolving doors that probably cost more than his monthly salary. Charlotte had coached him through 3 practice sessions, working on song selection and stage presence in a rented rehearsal room that smelled of old carpet and musical ambition. She'd helped him choose pieces that showcased his emotional range without requiring technical virtuosity he didn't possess. The Way You Look Tonight, Georgia on My Mind, and his original lullaby composition, which Charlotte had titled Miranda's Song without asking his permission. "Remember," Charlotte had said during their final preparation session, "you're not trying to be perfect. You're trying to be authentic. That's what Marcus wants to hear. Something real, something that makes people feel connected." The Pembertons' jazz lounge was smaller than Andre had expected, perhaps 30 tables surrounding a low stage where a baby grand piano waited under subdued lighting. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through tall windows, creating geometric patterns on the hardwood floor. Marcus Chen was younger than Andre had anticipated, perhaps 40, with the kind of casual confidence that came from knowing his place in the world. He greeted Andre with a firm handshake and offered coffee from a silver service that probably cost more than Andre's rent. "Charlotte speaks very highly of your abilities," Marcus said as they settled at a table near the piano. "She says you have something special, emotional authenticity that's becoming rare in commercial music." "I'm not sure about that," Andre replied honestly. "I just play what feels right." "That's exactly what we're looking for. Too many performers these days sound like they're trying to impress people instead of connect with them." Marcus gestured toward the piano. "Whenever you're ready, I'd love to hear what you do." Andre walked to the piano bench, his heart beating faster than usual, but his hands steady. The Steinway was perfectly tuned, its keys responsive in a way that made him understand why people spoke reverently about quality instruments. He began with Georgia on My Mind, letting the familiar melody flow from his fingers while his mind quieted the voice that insisted he didn't belong here. The song filled the intimate space with warmth, each note carrying the weight of longing and love that Ray Charles had made famous but that Andre had made his own through years of late night practice in empty hotel lobbies. When he finished, Marcus was smiling. "That was beautiful. What else do you have for me?" Andre played his original composition next, the lullaby that had emerged from countless nights of singing his children to sleep. The melody was simple but haunting, speaking of protection and tenderness and the fierce love that drives parents to impossible sacrifices. "That's yours?" Marcus asked when the last note faded. "Yes, sir. It's remarkable. Original compositions make a venue special, give people something they can't hear anywhere else." Marcus made notes on a small pad. "One more song?" Andre closed his eyes and began The Way You Look Tonight, thinking about Sarah as he played, about the way she'd looked in her wedding dress, about the way she'd smiled when he played this song during her final weeks. The music became a conversation with memory, each phrase a love letter to the woman who'd believed in his dreams, even when he'd forgotten them himself. When he opened his eyes, Marcus was watching him with the expression of someone who'd witnessed something unexpectedly moving. "Mr. Washington," Marcus said, "I'd like to offer you a position." The contract documents covered Charlotte's office desk like a map to a foreign country, dense with legal terminology and numbers that seemed too large to be real. Andre stared at the papers, reading and rereading the figures, while Charlotte explained the terms with barely contained excitement. $4 million over 3 years, she said, pointing to a highlighted section. 1.5 million advance, upon signing, with the remainder paid out in performance bonuses and royalty percentages. Andre's hands trembled slightly as he held the contract. 3 weeks had passed since his audition at the Pemberton, 3 weeks of increasingly frequent performances that had built his confidence and his reputation. Word had spread through Charlotte's network about the janitor who played piano like he was channeling pure emotion. Booking requests had multiplied faster than Andre could accommodate while maintaining his day jobs. But this was beyond anything he'd imagined possible. "Meridian Records wants to build an entire campaign around your story," Charlotte continued. "The struggling single father, working multiple jobs, playing piano in hotel lobbies at 3 in the morning. They see enormous commercial potential in authentic narratives right now." Andre looked up from the contract. "They want to make a story out of my life? They want to share your story. There's a difference." Charlotte's voice carried the confidence of someone who'd navigated these waters many times before. Documentary, crews, recording sessions, media interviews, the full treatment for a major label launch. The money would solve everything, all the medical debt, the rent, college funds for Miranda and Steve, a house with bedrooms for each child, maybe even a yard where Steve could play soccer. Financial security that would let Andre focus on being a father instead of constantly worrying about bills. But the touring schedule made his stomach clench with anxiety. 18 months of touring, Andre read aloud from the contract, starting 6 weeks after signing. How much touring? Charlotte hesitated, which told Andre everything he needed to know. It's extensive. Major cities across the country, some international venues. The label wants to capitalize on the momentum while it's strongest. How extensive? Approximately 200 dates over 18 months. Some single performances, some week-long residencies in key markets. Andre did the math quickly. 200 dates in 18 months meant being away from home more than half the time. Missing bedtime stories, and homework help, and school conferences, and soccer games, and all the small moments that made up the texture of family life. "I can't be away from my children that much," Andre said quietly. "The contract includes provisions for their care," Charlotte said quickly. "Private school tuition, full-time nanny, housing allowances. Your kids would be better provided for than most children in this country. Provided for by strangers while their father travels around playing piano for other strangers." Charlotte leaned forward, her expression intense. "Andre, this is generational wealth. This is the kind of opportunity that changes not just your life, but your children's lives, their children's lives. How many people get a chance like this?" Andre stood up and walked to Charlotte's office window, looking down at the street below, where normal people went about their normal lives. 3 months ago, he'd been one of them. Working, struggling, hoping for small miracles like overtime. "Shifts or utility payment extensions? I need to think about this," he said. "Of course, but they need an answer by Monday. Opportunities like this don't wait, and neither do record labels." The drive home took Andre through familiar neighborhoods, where children played on sidewalks and families walked together toward corner stores and bus stops. His world, the world he'd shared with Sarah and was now sharing with Miranda and Steve, the world that $4 million would allow him to leave behind. At home, Miranda was helping Steve with math homework while something bubbled on the stove. Dinner, prepared by his 12-year-old daughter because Daddy was at business meetings instead of being present for the daily routine that held their family together. "How did it go?" Miranda asked, looking up from Steve's worksheet. Andre had told them about the record label's interest in general terms, not wanting to build false hope or create anxiety about changes that might never happen. Now, with a signed contract that would transform their lives waiting for his signature, the weight of the decision felt crushing. "Good," he said. "We'll talk about it after dinner." But Steve had already moved on to more pressing concerns. "Daddy, can you help me with this word problem? It's about a man who has to choose between two jobs." The irony wasn't lost on Andre. He sat beside his son and read the math problem aloud. "Mr. Johnson can work at Company A for $30 an hour for 40 hours a week, or at Company B for $50 an hour for 25 hours a week. Which job would pay him more money?" "Company A," Steve said confidently. 30 times 40 is 1,200. 50 times 25 is only 1,225. Wait, that's not right. Andre walked through the calculation with Steve, explaining how to multiply hours by wages, but his mind kept returning to his own impossible equation. How do you calculate the value of being present versus the security of being wealthy? How do you weigh immediate family needs against long-term financial stability? After dinner, while Steve watched cartoons in the living room, Andre and Miranda cleaned dishes together in the kitchen. She'd been quiet during the meal, her emotional intelligence picking up on undercurrents she couldn't quite identify. "Are you going to take the job?" she asked directly. Andre wasn't surprised she'd guessed. Miranda had been his confidant since Sarah's death, the one person who understood both his hopes and his fears. "It's complicated," he said. "The job would mean traveling a lot, being away from home for weeks at a time." Miranda was quiet for a moment, scrubbing a plate with unusual concentration. "How much traveling?" "A lot. Maybe half the time, maybe more." "For how long?" 18 months. Miranda set down the plate and looked at him directly. "Would we be okay financially? Like really okay?" Andre hesitated, then decided she deserved honesty. "We'd be more than okay. We'd never have to worry about money again. But you'd be gone. But you'd be safe. Good schools, nice house, college funds, everything your mother and I wanted for you." Miranda dried her hands on the dish towel, her expression thoughtful. "Remember when Mama was really sick? And you used to sleep in the hospital chair next to her bed, even though the nurses said you could go home? Of course. She told me once that having you there was worth more than all the medicine they were giving her. She said some things you can't buy, no matter how much money you have." The observation hit Andre with unexpected force. Sarah had indeed insisted on his presence during her final weeks, choosing comfort over convenience, even when it meant Andre missed work and added financial stress to their already overwhelming situation. "This is different," Andre said. "This is about providing for you and Steve. We don't need providing for if we don't have you." That evening, after the children were asleep, Andre sat in the living room with the contract document spread on the coffee table. The numbers were still staggering, life-changing amounts of money that would solve every practical problem his family faced. But Miranda's words echoed in his mind, mixing with memories of Sarah's final conversations about what mattered most. In life, she'd been clear in her priorities. Family first, everything else second. Money was a tool, not a goal. Security was important, but presence was essential. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. Charlotte's name appeared on the screen. "I wanted to check in," she said. "I know this is a big decision." "It's the biggest decision I've ever faced," Andre admitted. "For what it's worth, I think you should take it. This kind of opportunity, it doesn't come around twice. What if I asked them to modify the touring schedule? Fewer dates? More time? At home?" Charlotte was quiet for a moment. "I could try to negotiate, but they're pretty firm on the promotional strategy. The story they want to tell requires extensive touring, lots of media exposure. That's how they justify the advance money. After Charlotte hung up, Andre walked to the children's bedroom and stood in the doorway watching them sleep. Miranda was curled around a stuffed animal she'd had since she was 5, while Steve had somehow managed to tangle himself in his blankets despite starting the night in a normal position. They looked peaceful, secure in the knowledge that Daddy would be there in the morning to make breakfast and walk them to school and help with homework and read bedtime stories. The routine that had held their family together since Sarah died. $4 million would buy them everything except the one thing they needed most, their father's presence in their daily lives. Andre made his decision standing in that doorway. Watching his children sleep, the contract would wait until Monday for his answer. But Andre already knew what he had to do. The suitcase sat half-packed on Andre's bed like a question he couldn't answer. 2 days until the contract deadline, and his mind remained torn between the practical necessity of the record deal and the emotional reality of what it would cost his family. He'd packed and unpacked the same clothes 3 times, each attempt, feeling like a rehearsal for a decision he wasn't ready to make. Saturday morning brought unexpected clarity in the form of Steve's soccer game. Andre had coached the community center team for 2 years, volunteering his time on weekends when most single fathers might have chosen to rest. But watching 8-year-olds discover teamwork and perseverance had become one of his few genuine pleasures, a reminder that some things mattered more than money. "Daddy, are you coming to my game today?" Steve asked over breakfast, his face bright with the assumption that of course Daddy would be there, like always. "Wouldn't miss it," Andre said, though the words carried more weight than usual. If he signed the record contract, how many games would he miss? How many moments like this would become casualties of his success? Miranda looked up from her cereal, her expression thoughtful. "Can I talk to you after the game? About the job thing?" Andre nodded, recognizing the serious tone that meant his daughter had been thinking deeply about their family's situation. At 12, Miranda had developed an emotional wisdom that both impressed and worried him. Children shouldn't have to carry such understanding of adult complexities. The soccer field at Riverside Park was muddy from the previous night's rain, which meant the kids would return home filthy and exhausted. Exactly the way youth soccer was supposed to be. Andre stood on the sideline with the other parents, mostly mothers who worked multiple jobs and fathers who squeezed family time between shifts and overtime. These were his people, Andre realized. Working families who measured success in small victories, making rent on time, keeping children fed and safe, finding moments of joy between responsibilities. The record contract would lift him out of this world and into one where success meant album sales and touring schedules and media appearances. "Coach Andre," Steve called from the field during halftime, jogging over with his jersey already covered in mud. "Did you see my goal?" "Best goal of the season," Andre said, ruffling his son's sweaty hair. "You're getting better every week." "Will you still coach next season?" The question was innocent, but it hit Andre like a physical blow. Next season was 9 months away, right in the middle of the touring schedule outlined in the record contract. If he signed, he'd miss not just games, but entire seasons of his children's lives. "We'll see, buddy. Go finish the game." After Steve's team won 3-2, the families gathered for the traditional post-game pizza at Tony's, a neighborhood institution that served decent food at prices working families could afford. Andre watched his son celebrate with teammates, sharing stories about the game's best moments with the pure joy that came from being 8 years old and surrounded by friends. Miranda sat beside Andre in the booth, picking at her pizza while observing the scene with her characteristic seriousness. "This is nice," she said quietly. "What is?" "This. Being normal. Being together." She looked directly at him. "If you take the job, we won't have this anymore, will we?" Andre felt the weight of her question settle in his chest. "We'd have other things, better things, security, opportunities." "I don't want other things," Miranda interrupted. "I want you." The simple declaration hung between them, cutting through all the rational arguments about financial security and future possibilities. A 12-year-old girl who'd lost her mother didn't want opportunities. She wanted her father present and available and part of her daily life. That evening, Andre called Charlotte to discuss the possibility of modifying the contract terms. Her response was swift and definitive. "I spoke with the label executives," she said. "They're not willing to negotiate on the touring schedule. It's essential to their marketing strategy." The story of the struggling father becomes less compelling if he's not fully committed to the opportunity. "What if I turned down the initial offer but stayed open to smaller deals? Local performances, regional touring." Charlotte's sigh was audible through the phone. "Andre, I need you to understand something. This kind of opportunity doesn't come twice. If you turn down Meridien Records, word will spread through the industry. Other labels will assume there was something wrong with the deal or with you as an artist. So it's all or nothing, pretty much. You're asking me to help you walk away from $4 million and a guaranteed music career after ending the call." Andre sat on his front steps, watching the neighborhood wind down for the evening. Children were called inside for baths and homework. Porch lights came on. The sounds of television and dinner conversation drifted from open windows. Mrs. Chen from next door joined him on her own front steps, the way neighbors had been doing for generations when life felt too heavy to bear alone. "You look troubled," she said in her careful English. "Big decision to make," Andre replied. "About work?" "About everything." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, the kind of comfortable silence that came from shared understanding of life's difficulties. She'd raised 3 children as a single mother after her husband died in a factory accident, working at the textile plant for 23 years to keep her family together. "My children wanted me to take better job in another city," she said, finally. "More money, bigger house, but I stayed here. You know why?" Andre shook his head. "Because children need roots more than they need money. They need to know their parent comes home every night. That's the most important job." Sunday arrived, with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made even familiar places seem touched with magic. Andre had promised the children a day at the state park, their first family outing in months that wasn't rushed or overshadowed by work schedules. They hiked the easy trail around Sunset Lake, Steve collecting interesting rocks, while Miranda took pictures with an old digital camera Andre had found at a thrift store. The day felt precious, suspended outside of time and worry, the kind of memory that would matter more than money decades later. "Look, Daddy," Steve called from ahead on the trail. "You can see our whole city from here." Andre joined his son at the overlook, looking down at the urban sprawl that contained their apartment, Steve's school, the community center where they spent afternoons, all the familiar landmarks that made up their world. From this height, the problems that felt overwhelming in daily life seemed smaller, more manageable. "It's beautiful," Miranda said, joining them at the railing. "Yeah," Andre agreed, though he was looking at his children rather than the view. On the drive home, Steve fell asleep in the back seat, while Miranda sat quietly in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing at Andre with the expression she wore when working through complex thoughts. "Can I tell you something?" she said finally. "Always. I've been thinking about what Mama would say about the job offer." Andre felt his chest tighten. "What do you think she'd say?" "I think she'd be proud that important people want you to play music. But I think she'd also remember what she told me in the hospital before she died." Andre pulled into their apartment complex parking lot, but didn't turn off the engine, sensing that this conversation needed to finish before they returned to normal life. "What did she tell you?" "She said that being rich doesn't matter if you're not rich in love, and that the best thing she ever did was make sure our family stayed together, even when it was hard." Miranda's words carried the weight of Sarah's final wisdom, the clarity that often came to people facing death about what truly mattered in life. Andre could almost hear Sarah's voice in his daughter's careful phrasing. She also said something, Else, Miranda continued. She said that if something ever happened to her, I should remind you that we chose each other as a family, and that choosing each other every day was more important than any other choice you could make. Andre turned off the engine and sat in the silence of the parking lot, feeling the full weight of the decision he faced. Monday was tomorrow. Charlotte would call in the morning expecting his answer. The contract would either be signed or rejected, and either choice would change their lives forever. That night, after Steve was tucked into bed with his traditional bedtime story, Andre found Miranda reading in the living room. She looked up when he entered, her expression expectant. "I've made my decision," Andre said. "And I'm going to call Charlotte tomorrow and tell her I can't sign the contract as written." Miranda's relief was visible, her shoulders relaxing, as if she'd been holding her breath for days. "Really, really. But I want you to understand what this means. We'll still be struggling financially. I'll still be working 2 jobs. Things will still be tight." "That's okay," Miranda said quickly. "We're good at being careful with money. And you're getting more piano gigs now, right? Maybe that will help." Andre sat beside his daughter on the couch, remembering all the times Sarah had sat in this same spot during her illness, talking through difficult decisions with the wisdom of someone who understood that time was more precious than any material possession. "There's something else I want to try," Andre said. "I'm going to ask Charlotte if she can help me build a music career that works around our family instead of despite it. Local performances, maybe some recording work that doesn't require extensive touring. You think that's possible?" "I don't know, but I think it's worth trying. Your mama always said there was more than one way to solve any problem." Miranda smiled, the first genuine smile Andre had seen from her in weeks. She did say that. "And if it doesn't work out, if we can't make music pay enough to help with our situation, at least we'll face whatever comes next together." Together. Miranda agreed. Later that evening, Andre called Charlotte to give her his preliminary decision. Her disappointment was clear, but professional. "I understand your position," she said. "But Andre, I have to ask, are you absolutely certain about this? Once we turn down Meridien, there's no going back." "I'm certain about my priorities," Andre replied, "but I'm hoping you can help me find a way to pursue music that doesn't require sacrificing my family. It will be harder. The money won't be as significant. The opportunities will be smaller, but they'll be mine on my terms." Charlotte was quiet for a moment. "Let me make some calls. Give me until Wednesday to see what other options might exist." "Thank you, Andre. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. I've seen too many artists sacrifice everything for success, only to realize they'd lost the things that made them worth listening to in the first place." After hanging up, Andre walked to his children's bedroom and stood in the doorway watching them sleep. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, bills that still needed paying, problems that still needed solving. But tonight his family was together under the same roof, safe and secure in the knowledge that they'd chosen each other over everything else the world had to offer. The suitcase still sat on Andre's bed, now empty, except for the hope that there might be another way forward. A path that honored both his musical gifts and his responsibilities as a father. He closed it and put it back in the closet, making room instead for the certainty that whatever came next, they would face it as a family. Wednesday morning arrived with Charlotte's phone call, her voice carrying an excitement that Andre hadn't heard since the Meridien Records offer first appeared. "I have news," she said without preamble. "Good news, I think." Andre was making breakfast for the children, balancing the phone between his shoulder and ear while scrambling eggs. "I'm listening. I spoke with 5 different industry contacts about alternative arrangements. Most of them weren't interested in modified deals, but one conversation led to something unexpected." Andre turned off the burner and gave Charlotte his full attention. "What kind of unexpected?" "James Morrison, the private event coordinator I mentioned before, he's been following your story through our network. Apparently, he played your recordings for a very wealthy client who's been looking for exactly what you offer, which is authentic talent for exclusive events. This client hosts intimate gatherings for other high-net-worth individuals, charity fundraisers, corporate retreats, private celebrations. They want a house musician, someone who can provide elegant background music, but also step forward for featured performances when the occasion calls for it. Andre felt his pulse quicken. What would that involve? 6 events per year, primarily weekends, mostly local but occasional travel within a 3-hour radius. Each event pays between $8,000 and $12,000, depending on scope and duration. Andre nearly dropped the phone. $8,000 to $12,000 per event. The client values authenticity and exclusivity. They're willing to pay premium rates for access to talent that isn't available through normal booking channels. Andre's mind raced through the calculations. 6 events at an average of $10,000 each would mean $60,000 annually, more than his warehouse salary, for work that wouldn't interfere with his family responsibilities. There's more, Charlotte continued. The client is also interested in commissioning original compositions for special occasions. Wedding songs, memorial pieces, celebration themes. They're talking about an additional $20,000 to $30,000 annually for original work. Are you serious? Completely serious. But Andre, there's a condition. They want to meet you first, hear you perform in person before making any commitments. Tonight, Andre looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. 7:30 a.m. The children needed to get ready for school. He had a full day at the warehouse, evening responsibilities at home. Tonight's not good. I have the kids, and I can't arrange childcare on such short notice. What if the children could come? With you? The client specifically requested that you bring your family. They want to meet the people who inspire your music. The suggestion was so unexpected that Andre wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. They want to meet Miranda and Steve. They believe that understanding your motivation as a father is essential to appreciating your art. The invitation extends to all 3 of you. Andre felt a flutter of hope mixed with nervousness. Where would this meeting take place? The client's private estate, about 30 minutes outside the city. Dinner at 7, performance at 8:30. Very casual, very family-friendly. After Charlotte hung up, Andre stood in his kitchen trying to process the unexpected turn his life had taken. 6 months ago, he'd been a struggling single father cleaning hotel lobbies and playing piano to cope with grief. Now he was being invited to perform for wealthy strangers who might offer him a way to pursue music without sacrificing his family. Daddy. Miranda appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed for school. Who was on the phone? Charlotte. She has a new opportunity she wants us to consider. Us. All of us. They want to meet our whole family. Miranda's expression grew thoughtful. Is this instead of the big record deal? Maybe it would be different, smaller, more focused on our area, less traveling. That sounds better. Steve bounded into the kitchen, his hair sticking up in 3 directions and his shirt buttoned incorrectly. Are we going somewhere exciting? Potentially, Andre said, helping Steve fix his shirt. How would you feel about meeting some new people tonight? People who might want Daddy to play piano for them. Will there be food? Andre laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd had in weeks. Yes, buddy, there will be food. That afternoon at the warehouse, Andre found it difficult to concentrate on his usual tasks. Dave noticed his distraction during the lunch break. You seem different today, Dave observed. Good different, less worried. Maybe, Andre said. I might have found a way to use my music to help with our financial situation. Nothing's certain. Yet, but it's hopeful. Music, huh? I didn't know you played. Piano, it's something I've been working on in my spare time. Dave nodded approvingly. Good for you, man. Too many people give up on their talents when life gets hard. Takes courage to keep developing something that might not pay off. The conversation stayed with Andre throughout the afternoon. Dave was right. It did take courage to believe that art could be practical, that creativity could contribute to survival. But maybe, Andre thought, that's what Charlotte's client was offering. a way for his music to matter both artistically and financially. At 5:30 p.m., Andre picked up the children from the community center, explaining the evening's plans during the drive home. "So these people might give you a job playing piano?" Steve asked from the back seat. "Maybe. We'll see what they think of our family." "What if they don't like us?" Miranda asked. Andre met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Then we'll know they're not the right people to work with. But I have a feeling they will like us. We're pretty likable people." As they pulled into their apartment complex parking lot, Andre felt a calm certainty settling over him. Whatever happened tonight, they would face it together, as a family, making decisions that honored both their dreams and their bonds. The estate sat behind wrought iron gates that opened silently as Andre's Honda approached, revealing a circular driveway lined with mature oak trees, whose autumn leaves caught the early evening light like scattered gold coins. The house itself was elegant but welcoming, colonial architecture with warm lighting spilling from tall windows and the kind of understated luxury that whispered rather than shouted its wealth. "Wow," Steve breathed from the back seat, his face pressed against the window. "It's like a castle." "It's beautiful," Miranda added, though Andre could hear the nervousness underlying her appreciation. Charlotte met them at the front door, looking more relaxed than Andre had ever seen her. She wore a simple dress instead of her usual business attire, and her smile seemed genuinely warm rather than professionally pleasant. "Perfect timing," she said, embracing Andre briefly before turning to the children. "Miranda and Steve, I'm so glad you could come. Mrs. Patterson has been looking forward to meeting you." Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a woman in her 70s, with silver hair and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and warmth. She greeted them in a living room that felt more like a comfortable family space than a formal reception area, despite the obvious quality of the furnishings. "Mr. Washington," she said, taking Andre's hand in both of hers, "I can't tell you how much your music has meant to me. When James played your recordings, I knew immediately that I'd found what I'd been searching for." "Thank you," Andre replied, still somewhat overwhelmed by the gracious reception. "I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're looking for." "Authenticity," Mrs. Patterson said simply. "Music that comes from the heart rather than the conservatory. Art that tells real stories about real life." She turned to the children. "And I wanted to meet the people who inspire that authenticity." Steve, never one to be intimidated by new situations, stepped forward with characteristic directness. "Are you really rich?" "Steve," Miranda hissed, embarrassed by her brother's bluntness, but Mrs. Patterson laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "I am fortunate to have more money than I need, yes, which is why I like to use it to support things that matter, like beautiful music and the families who create it." Dinner was served in a cozy dining room that felt intimate despite its obvious elegance. Mrs. Patterson asked thoughtful questions about the children's school experiences, their interests, their hopes for the future. She listened with the kind of attention that made each person feel valued and heard. "Miranda, Charlotte tells me you help take care of your brother and manage household responsibilities," Mrs. Patterson said during the main course. "That shows remarkable maturity." "I don't mind," Miranda replied. "Daddy works really hard to take care of us. I want to help however I can." "And Steve, I understand you're interested in science?" Steve launched into an enthusiastic explanation of his solar energy project, his initial nervousness forgotten in the joy of sharing his interests with someone who asked genuine questions and offered thoughtful responses. Andre watched his children bloom under Mrs. Patterson's attention, realizing that this evening was as much about evaluating their family dynamics as it was about assessing his musical abilities. After dinner, Mrs. Patterson led them to a music room where a magnificent Steinway grand piano sat near floor-to-ceiling, windows that looked out onto gardens lit by subtle landscape lighting. "This is where I'd like to hear you play," she said to Andre. "Not as an audition, but as a conversation. Music is meant to be shared, not performed in isolation. Andre approached the piano with less nervousness than he'd expected. Something about Mrs. Patterson's presence, her genuine warmth, her obvious appreciation for family bonds, made the environment feel safe rather than evaluative. He began with, "What a Wonderful World," the song that had started his recorded repertoire, letting the familiar melody flow from his fingers while his children settled into comfortable chairs nearby. Mrs. Patterson sat where she could watch both Andre and his children, her expression attentive but peaceful. Next, Andre played his original lullaby composition, the piece Charlotte had titled Miranda's Song. The gentle melody filled the room with warmth, speaking of bedtime stories and whispered prayers and the fierce protective love that drives parents to impossible sacrifices. "That's the song Daddy made up for us," Steve whispered to Mrs. Patterson, his voice filled with pride. Finally, Andre played Amazing Grace, the song that had carried him through Sarah's funeral and countless nights of grief and longing. His children had heard him play it dozens of times, but tonight it felt different, not like an expression of loss, but like a celebration of grace found and families preserved. When the last note faded, Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a moment before speaking. "Mr. Washington, I'd like to offer you a position as my family's house musician. 6 events per year, commissioned original pieces as needed, all scheduled around your family's availability. 60,000 annually to start, with increases based on the scope of commissioned work." Andre felt his heart skip a beat. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. But I have one condition." Andre's pulse quickened with anxiety. "What condition?" Mrs. Patterson smiled, looking at Miranda and Steve before returning her gaze to Andre. "That you never let the business of music interfere with the joy of being a father. Your children are your greatest composition, Mr. Washington. Everything else is just accompaniment." Andre looked at his children, saw Miranda's hopeful expression and Steve's trusting smile, and felt the last piece of his decision fall into place. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, "I accept your offer." 6 months later, Andre Washington sat at the new piano in their living room, the late afternoon sunlight streaming through windows that belonged to them now. The small house in Maple Heights wasn't grand. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a kitchen just wide enough for the family table Sarah had insisted they buy as newlyweds, but it was theirs. Purchased with the down payment Mrs. Patterson had advanced against his first year's contract. The medical bills were paid. The eviction notice was a distant memory, replaced by a mortgage payment they could afford and still have money left over for groceries, school supplies, and the occasional family dinner at restaurants where they didn't have to count every dollar. "Daddy, can you play the song you wrote for Mrs. Patterson's anniversary party?" Steve called from the kitchen, where he was working on homework while Miranda prepared their after-school snack. Andre's fingers found the melody of Golden Years, the composition he'd created for the Pattersons' 50th wedding anniversary celebration. The piece had been his 3rd commissioned work, a gentle waltz that captured the grace of enduring love. Mrs. Patterson had paid him $8,000 for that single song, more than he used to make in 2 months at the warehouse. He still worked part-time at Morrison Logistics, partly for the health insurance, but mostly because he'd grown to appreciate the community of working people who understood the value of honest labor. Dave had been promoted to shift supervisor and made sure Andre's schedule accommodated his musical commitments. The hotel job was a memory now, though Andre occasionally drove past the Grand Meridien and remembered those late-night sessions at the lobby piano. Charlotte had helped him understand that those solitary hours hadn't been wasted time. They'd been preparation for everything that followed. "How's the new piece coming along?" Miranda asked, joining him on the piano bench. At 13, she'd started taking piano lessons herself, discovering a natural talent that reminded Andre of Sarah's quick ear for melody. "Slowly," Andre admitted. Mrs. Patterson wants something for her granddaughter's wedding that captures the feeling of new beginnings, but I keep hearing echoes of other songs. Maybe that's okay, Miranda said. Maybe all beginnings have echoes of what came before. Andre looked at his daughter, marveling at the wisdom that seemed to emerge naturally from children who'd learned early that life was both fragile and resilient. Miranda's grades had improved dramatically since their move to Maple Heights, and she'd joined the school's honor society and debate team. Stability, Andre had learned, was as important to academic success as natural intelligence. Steve bounded into the living room, his backpack trailing papers and the enthusiasm of an 8-year-old who discovered that the world was full of interesting questions. "Guess what happened at school today?" he announced, not waiting for an answer. Mr. Kim came to talk about his store and renewable energy, and he told everyone that you're a professional musician now. "What did you tell your classmates?" Andre asked. "That you're the same daddy you always were, but now people pay you to play piano instead of you playing piano for free?" Andre laughed, appreciating his son's practical assessment of the situation. Steve was right. The essential things hadn't changed. Andre still made breakfast every morning, still helped with homework every evening, still read bedtime stories and attended soccer games, and worried about the thousands of small details that comprised being a parent. The difference was that worry no longer consumed his thoughts. Financial security had given him the mental space to be fully present during conversations with his children, to listen to their dreams and concerns without the constant background noise of unpaid bills and impossible choices. "Are you playing tonight?" Miranda asked, referring to his weekly performance at the Pemberton Hotel's jazz lounge. Marcus had offered him a regular Friday evening slot after word spread about his association with Mrs. Patterson. The 3-hour gig paid $600 and gave Andre an opportunity to play for audiences who appreciated music for its own sake. "Yes, but not too late. I'll be home by 11. Can we come listen sometime?" Steve asked. "Mrs. Patterson said we're always welcome at her events." "Different audience," Andre explained. "But maybe we can arrange a special family performance night." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of Charlotte's car in the driveway. Her monthly visits had evolved from business meetings into friendship, and she'd become something like an honorary aunt to Miranda and Steve. "How's my favorite musical family?" she called as she entered through the front door, a privilege earned through months of proved trustworthiness and genuine care. "Charlotte!" Steve ran to hug her, his affection uncomplicated by the business relationship that had brought her into their lives. "I have news," Charlotte announced, settling into the armchair that had become her designated spot during visits. "James Morrison called this morning. Mrs. Patterson recommended you to another family, the Hendersons, who are looking for a house musician for their summer estate in the mountains." Andre looked up from the piano, interested but cautious. "What kind of commitment?" "4 events during June and July, beautiful location, excellent pay. But here's the best part. They specifically requested that your children be included in the arrangements. Apparently, Mrs. Patterson told them that your family is part of what makes your music special." Miranda and Steve exchanged glances. A kind of wordless communication that siblings develop when they've learned to navigate the world as a team. "Would we get to see mountains?" Steve asked. "Big ones," Charlotte confirmed, "with hiking trails and a lake for swimming." "That sounds like an adventure," Miranda said, looking at Andre with the expression that meant she was analyzing all the practical considerations while allowing herself to hope. Andre realized that this was what success looked like for him, not fame or massive record sales, but the ability to provide security and opportunities for his children while pursuing the music that fed his soul. He thought about Sarah, about the conversations they'd had during her final weeks, about what mattered most in life. She would be proud, Andre knew, not just of the music or the financial stability, but of the choices he'd made to keep their family together, to honor love over ambition, presence over profit. "Tell the Hendersons we're interested," Andre said, pulling both children close to him on the piano bench. As long as we can do it together. As evening settled over their small house in Maple Heights, Andre played the lullaby that had started everything, the simple melody that had emerged from his love for his children and somehow opened doors he'd never imagined walking through. Miranda and Steve listened quietly, secure in the knowledge that their father would always come home, would always choose them first, would always remember that the most important music was the sound of a family that had chosen to stay together. Through everything life offered and demanded, the piano keys caught the last light of day as Andre played, and outside their windows the neighborhood settled into the gentle rhythms of evening. Children called in for dinner, porch lights switching, on families gathering around tables where they would share the day's stories and plan for tomorrow's possibilities.